I worked in Durham prison for a wee while in the resettlement programme, which was whenever you're about to come out of prison and you're going to be resettled back into the community. So it was really part of your coming out and your probation and everything after you leave prison. I suppose the next step for me then was the policing board, which is the kind of Stormont level oversight of the policing. So I applied in June to see what the process was like, never thinking that they would appoint me the first time round, but they did. And I suppose a young woman from the Northwest with a Protestant background is an unusual applicant, so they have to kind of fit lots of profiles. So you need so many men, so many women, so many people from a nationalist background, so many from a loyalist background and all that. So I obviously fitted a box.
What does your role involve as Vice Chair of the Police and Community Safety Partnership?
Now, as Vice Chair of Partnership at the board, I would have responsibility for engaging with all 11 council areas. So we've just reduced from 26 to 11 councils. So we now have 11 PCSPs across Northern Ireland. So I'd have responsibility for engaging with them, and we also distribute their budget. And Tony says that we kind of control the finances. Unfortunately, the Department of Justice control the finances, so we get our budget from them, and then we work with the police around how they distribute that. So we would work with them on their budgets and some of the projects they do, and we would maybe set some key priorities for areas. So at the minute, we've just distributed out $1.5 million to PCSPs, and we've asked them to look specifically coming up to Christmas at domestic abuse. I would vice chair a monthly meeting, and then I would go out and see PCSPs right across Northern Ireland, and we very much have responsibility for partnership with all the agencies, so your education authorities and your youth justice agency and that type of thing, and schools as well and all that. So, and this type of role as well, where there's an opportunity for the board to go out and engage with young people, that quite often will fall to me. I'm the youngest member of the board as well, so I think they think it's quite appropriate that I go. It's not that long ago I was a young person, so I think they think it's all right for me to go out and speak to young people. So I am Vice Chair of Partnership, and within that I have a role to chair the Youth Advisory Panel. So that is made up of a number of youth providers and people who engage with young people, and they advise the board on anything to do with youth engagement and things that might impact on young people. Now, we have lots of good things in Northern Ireland. The Youth Justice Agency, the PSNI, have something called discretionary disposal, where you can work with a youth officer, and you don't necessarily have to have a criminal record the first time you engage the police. So there are some good things, but I think we need to move away from criminalising young people. And once there's signs that young people may be committing crime or starting to go down that route, wraparound services where social services, health professionals, everything to do with your mental health and the support that you're getting at home, looking at the reasons why you might be committing crime, it's a much better way. And I think Tony will probably agree that the PSNI certainly don't have all the answers, to deal with young people, and they're very often the last agency that you will come into contact with, and they can't always be the solution to all the problems that you've got. I think young people who are victims of crime need to be supported better. Should that be, whether victims in the street or victims through bullying. Maybe there's a whole lot of internet stuff now at the minute that's happening, and there's going to be, I think, a huge swathe of young people who will be victims of crime who need to be supported. In terms of the PSNI, I would like to see young people from a broader range of areas and schools applying to be police officers. I think that's really important if we're going to build trust in communities. At the minute, it tends to be kind of grammar school, university graduates who feel that it's that they can apply to the police and have a role, but it's a great career. It's got huge opportunities in lots of different areas, and there's loads of different skills that you can apply whenever you are in the PSNI. So I like to see young people from all over feeling like they can apply to be a police officer. And then in terms of the board and all the criminal justice agencies, I think that we need to be more creative about how we engage with you, give you better opportunities to have a bit of influence on the policies and the things that are going to impact on young people. Things like this I think are brilliant because it gives you the chance to kind of talk just to individuals and stuff, but there's things like the policing plan which is coming out, which is going to obviously have a big impact on young people, and it would be great to see more creative and better and more exciting ways for you to engage and be able to influence plans like that and things. So that's a few of the things I think that young people could engage with in the justice system in the next wee while.
I joined the police in 1986. As Barry said, I went to university first. Very lucky, I had a good education, went to a Catholic, all boys Catholic grammar school. I often say the only thing missing from my great Catholic grammar school were girls and Protestants. But it was a really good school, and I got a really good education and got to go to university. First person in my family to go to university, and there was a bomb went off in the university and it killed 2 people, who were police officers. I didn't know it at the time, but they were doing an education programme. I think they were doing a law degree in the university at that time. So that had a big impact on me. I'm from a Catholic background, and you go back to the 80s, policing probably wasn't seen as a real option for many Catholics in Northern Ireland. Percentage-wise, in the RUC at that time, something less than 10%, about 8% they would say was the makeup of Catholics within the RUC. RUC at that time was about 14,500 officers, mostly men, because we didn't recruit many women either, which is not a good thing. Something that, again, we're intent on addressing. I remember my very first patrol in Derry. We're on a night shift. We got into a grey Land Rover and drove up the Northland Road, and my sergeant told me to get out. We were going to do a checkpoint. Police getting out and stopping cars, and I was absolutely terrified. I thought everybody going past was going to try and kill me. So I jumped out of the back of the Land Rover and ran for the nearest bushes and hid there for about half an hour until the sergeant called me back to the back of the Land Rover. Terrified. The vast majority of people in Derry were very kind and very supportive. And it's, for me, I remember the very small kindnesses of people. People weren't openly engaging with policing at that time. The vast majority of Catholics and nationalists on this side of the river probably felt they couldn't engage with us. But I do recall being in what was the Rosemount neighbourhood team at that time, and walking through Rosemount and Cregan almost on a daily basis. And people would come past you and just whisper, "God bless you, son," or "Look after yourself." And that really meant an awful lot to me. So we have local policing teams. So you're in your mum or dad's car and you have a road traffic collision and you need the police out. It's the local policing team who go and deal with the road crash and help you out of that situation. You also have local neighbourhood teams that Catherine talked about, and they deal with more critical areas in neighbourhoods. They're dealing with large-scale antisocial behaviour problems, they're dealing with drugs problems, they're dealing with real social issues, and they work very closely with community groups to try and solve some of those issues. The other uniform part that we have in the city here is TSGs, and those are support group officers. Maybe you would know them as rat police. So very often those are the guys and girls you see in the blue suits, dealing with the not very nice situations, and most recently maybe flags protests in Belfast where you've missiles being thrown at police, petrol bombs. TSG officers do that. So if we have a missing child or a missing person, who do we use? The TSG folks, because they're trained to search. If we're doing searches for drugs, who do we use? The TSGs, because they know what to look for and where to look.
Why or do you think the Catholic community is too scared to join the police force?
Probably for a number of historical reasons. I talked about through the 80s and 90s the representation of Catholics within the RUC. So you've no historical background in joining the police. You've no family histories in joining the police. Within the Protestant community, you would have generational pieces, just like any other industry. My daddy did this, or my mummy did that, so I might think about doing that as well. With that comes a familiarity with what policing is about, and I think then it makes it much easier to make a choice. The other point around why Catholics didn't historically join the police was around intimidation, and that still happens unfortunately in our society. We have officers from Catholic nationalist areas and their family, once they joined the police, they couldn't go back to visit their mum and dad. They would be stationed far away from home. When my grandfather died in Belfast, I couldn't go to his funeral in the chapel, just because of where he lived. So there's things like that are a big impact on people. And I'm really pleased to say that nowadays we get Catholics applying regularly. The last recruitment campaign, 5,500 people applied to join the police.
What have you and the policing board changed in the past year to make the young people of our society safer?
The board very much has at its core human rights, and the human rights of young people are considered there. So there's a monthly meeting around what the PSNI do in terms of human rights issues, and within that it's about keeping people safe. So we also then would take advice. We have a youth advisory panel that I chair, and round the table are members of organisations who work with a whole raft of young people. So that's from the Education Authority, who work with young people from all over the place, to people who work with very vulnerable young people, and also young people who are involved in the criminal justice system. And all of our work is looked at in terms of human rights and equality. So that is about keeping young people safe. We make sure that all our policies and all our plans are kind of young people proofed, I suppose. So we engage with young people, and we engage with the agencies who know about young people to make sure that the issues that are coming up that are impacting the most on young people are the issues that are top of the agenda, and we make sure we give those good attention. So something like, I'll give you an example at the moment, something that's coming up quite a lot is cybercrime and all the issues that can impact on young people, and that's everything from bullying to sexting and images that can appear online, young people getting kind of blackmailed, or there was a really sad case there of the young fellow that committed suicide. So those things like that are top of our agenda, and we have put a huge pressure, I suppose, on the PSNI to look at that as an issue, and we are constantly getting information and advice from people who are experts in that, and how we can keep young people safe, and working in partnership with the PSNI to make sure we come up with strategies that are going to ensure your safety. And that's a lot about influencing your behaviour as much as anything else. But so we will look at key things that are impacting young people at the moment, and that's from lots of advice, and it is a huge amount of work, but really we're at that level where we look at the strategy, and then the PSNI will very much carry out the operation of that and the day-to-day running of that. So I might sit around the table and talk about how it's a great idea, and then we pass it off to Tony to actually do it.
I suppose policing then becomes around what Catherine says, how do we protect people? And I could talk generally about how we prevent crime and protect people and protect the vulnerable. But for young people, and I'm interested to hear from you, what are the big issues for young people? Probably drugs. As Catherine says, probably that online safety piece around, bullying, images, all of that. The other big issue that comes up when we talk about young people is antisocial behaviour. I just want to talk about those three areas and what we've done in recent times around that. We have within the neighbourhood teams trained officers, our case officers as we call them, and the case officers are case stands for Citizenship and Safety Education, and they're the officers who go into your schools and talk to you just about those issues, how to protect yourself when you're on Facebook, when you're on Twitter, when you're doing your Instagram or Snapchat or whatever it is. What does that mean? How to protect yourself from predators who are out there, but actually how to protect yourself, from doing something daft that you'll regret. Because when that image is up there, girls and young man, when that image is up there, it's up there forever. And whether you think Snapchat goes away and they can only see it, it's up there forever. So we do a number of education pieces around that. We've held a number of seminars in the city, not only with young people, but actually with your parents, to talk to parents about how they have a bit of oversight. Because I'm a dad, I've got 4 kids, I have 3 girls and a boy, and parents are we're a bit daft when we come to all this stuff, the online stuff, as probably all your folks are, maybe just less comfortable with it than you folks. And really just asking parents to have a wee bit of oversight, to look over your shoulder and say, what are you looking at? What's the site? I think the fear parents have is this kind of online grooming. That's not where we see most of this happening. Sometimes you get the high profile cases. It's actually peer-to-peer stuff. So between groups of kids, and you get bullying and you get people being picked on, and that's probably where the bulk of this stuff sits. Drugs, again, we deliver lots of case material on drugs, and we're really, really open and honest about drugs and the effect they have on you. what the dangers are of them. Antisocial behaviour is the other big area that kind of gets flagged up around young people quite a lot. I'm really conscious that antisocial behaviour sometimes isn't that antisocial. It's really about you folks gathering with your friends on a Friday or Saturday night and chatting. And I'm really conscious that we don't label that as antisocial. Now, when it gets into the criminal, when it gets into breaking windows or drinking on the street and, you know, annoying people, kicking their doors or whatever it is, that's different. That's beyond the bounds of what's reasonable. If you're standing around having a chat, that's not antisocial to me. Actually, that's quite social. That's just you engaging with your friends. And we're really conscious with the neighbourhood teams of not labelling people, of not criminalising those sorts of behaviours, and actually pushing back sometimes against communities and saying, do you know what? Those young people weren't doing anything.
I was born in 1953, and I suppose I was born from a policing family and that my grandfather had been in the police. I went to Queen's, did law. Everybody else became solicitors and barristers and things like that. And I said, no, I want to go out there and catch the bad people. So for a short period of time, I was out there thinking, right, I'm going to do this for about 2 years, and then I'm going to become a really clever lawyer who's going to go into the witness box and put police officers through all the various difficulties they have in answering questions sometime. But I was in the police for 2 years, enjoyed it, and the 2 years became 27 years.
Well, I work for an organisation called Rural Community Network. It's based in Cookstown, but I'm not from a rural area. I'm born and reared in Portadown. Roger's mentioned the year 1976. That's the year I was born, so sorry for making you feel a wee bit old.
There you go.
But I was born in 1976, so I was born in a town that we just said beforehand, has had its fair share of difficulties through all the troubles. I would actually say that I'm a child of the troubles. I was born into them, so I knew nothing else. The town that I was from had its difficulties across interface areas between Protestant and Catholic communities. It also had its difficulties with policing. Whenever I was a younger child growing up, an RUC officer to me was somebody who you held with high respect. It was a uniform to be frightened of. I was just saying beforehand that I would have knew most of the officers' names who would have come in and around our area. So you either had respect for them or you ran away from them. And then I suppose in the height of the troubles around Drumcree time, particularly from the community that I'm from, that level of respect flipped on its head very, very quickly in relation to preying issues. I was 19 at the time, and my perceptions of policing changed overnight, in a very negative way, I have to say, overnight. And I have been on a personal journey myself over the last 10 to 15 years to reconnect again with policing, from where the police have came and where they are now. That's my motivation for the job that I do, is that I have also challenged myself in terms of my own community's perceptions of policing, and it has changed again, thankfully, as Roger said, back into policing with the community. Within Protestant and loyalist areas and Catholic nationalist areas, policing is still very much an issue. It's hard for communities to engage with each other, as well as policing, and there's a legacy of policing in those areas as well. So my job has been, through our community network, has been trying to reconnect communities to police again.
Do you think that the time spent in the RUC affected your lifestyle?
I think when you were a serving police officer in the RUC and difficult times, you had to take certain precautions to stop yourself being identified as a member of the police service. For example, I always remember people saying that I think RUC officers probably owned more tumble dryers than anybody else, because we couldn't be seen to be hanging our uniform out on clotheslines to be dried. You had to sort of keep that away from the public. When my kids were at school, they were told that Daddy was a civil servant, and certainly never mentioned that he was a police officer. When you went to maybe go out to your car after being parked overnight, in case somebody had put an undercar booby trap underneath the car, you would have dropped your keys beside the car, and when you were picking your keys up, you'd have had a quick look underneath the car to see was there anything additional attached to it. You did that because you didn't want to draw attention to yourself. There were only certain parts of Northern Ireland you could go to socialise in. You went to places, I suppose, where you would have felt relatively safe, and it meant that we didn't really get a full view of what it was like socialising throughout the province. So those elements certainly did affect your lifestyle. Having said that, I mean, it wasn't all doom and gloom. It was in a country which employment can be difficult at times. It was a good, secure job. You had a very good pension. You were encouraged to go and study further at university. I was able to go and do a master's in a really exciting subject called policy analysis and strategic planning, which I must say was a wonderful subject. But again, it was something that you sort of had to do if you wanted to advance within policing. So there were pros and there were cons, but overall, I was very glad I was a police officer for the 27 years. We live in a far better environment now, where more and more you have folk from different communities joining the police. In my time, the police service was only 6% from the Catholic community and only 6% female. Nowadays, some 15 years later, it's roughly 30% are from the Catholic community, which is still far too low, and 30% are from the female community. So, it's good to see progress being made, but more progress still needs to be made. And that's why it's important that a police service reflects the various members of the community that it seeks to serve.
What training or previous experience do you have that has helped you in your current role?
I would have to say no qualification got me ready for the role that I do. It's all lived experience. And I would use a bit of my common sense and being a bit street smart to do the job that I do. You can do qualifications, master's degrees in conflict management, conflict studies and peace building and reconciliation. And yes, it gives you a bit of knowledge, but people skills is the one thing that I have had to develop, and I would like to think it's the one qualification that I have that has brought me to where I am today. Being able to relate to people at a very local level, being able to understand their issues, being able to translate their issues to those that matter and care, and relationship building. I will never help communities connect with police officers or anybody else if I don't have a relationship with those people, and a bit of honesty and a bit of integrity that comes with that. So it's good to have your foundational stuff, but if there's anything I would say to young people is what somebody said to me, Charmaine, you have people skills and that's what will get you through life. And I genuinely believe it's people skills that has helped me get to where I am today. You can do as much reading and experience and people skills has carried me through.
What would you change about the way young people are dealt with when they're in the wrong? Are young people treated fairly?
Very good question indeed, and I think it's something that society in general, the criminal justice system in particular, and indeed particularly the police service need to think about, because when people are born, nobody's born bad. It's just that sometimes people are influenced by their environment as to why they make certain decisions and why they go down certain pathways. Young people can respond to peer pressures. Young people can respond to folk within the community that maybe have undue influence. And as a result of that, they can sometimes, go across the law and break the law. And the difficulty is that if you break the law up to maybe the age of 16 or so, which is traditionally looked upon as the age of a young person, that can stay on your criminal record, and the criminal record can affect your future life, a bit like we were talking earlier on about, being a police officer. How did that affect me growing up? But if you have a criminal conviction for something, not only may you have to pay a fine, not only may you have to do some maybe community work or something, but it can maybe also stops you travelling to America in years to come.
What is your organisation's role in local communities?
Well, Rural Community Network is, I think it's one of the only funded rural organisations, about another one or two outside of Belfast, that would work on community relations issues across the whole of Northern Ireland. There used to be 13 of me working across rural Northern Ireland and the border counties, and now it's down to one. So it's been a difficult time to try and work with rural communities because the needs are still very much there. We would get queries all day, every day for different issues, not just on policing, but police officers would be in regular contact with me, looking us to help them to go into communities which maybe were at one time no-go areas. There's no really such thing now as a no-go area, which is good. But to try and help build relationships, to do programmes with them, to try and go in their own uniforms and communicate with young people and leaders within the community, and engage at that level. And it's about relationship building again, not just with me as a worker, but also with the police officers and the groups on the ground as well. So my job has been about breaking down barriers between communities, rural communities, and breaking the myths between communities and police. And I think it's important to understand that in my job, there's no interface walls. So if I walk into a village or a small town, like the likes of Portadown or the likes of Belfast that have walls that are separating communities, rural areas don't have that. So if I drive into a village, it can be split 50-50, but there's no wall down the road to tell me what side of the road I'm on, or where's welcome and where's not welcome. So that takes me a bit longer to try and work out what's going on within that rural area, to try and break down those barriers, and it's not an easy job. And I have to say, in urban areas, I live in an urban area, I've worked in urban areas for 10 years, people will say what they mean in an urban area. They'll lay their cards out on the table and say, this is what I think. Rural areas are completely different. We always say silence is golden in rural areas. A lot of people in rural communities don't want to talk about these kind of things. There's a perception, I suppose, out there that anything that happened in the Troubles or the conflict happened in towns and didn't make its way right towards the border. And it did. And it very much impacted rural areas. So policing along with that comes along with a whole load of other baggage that I have to try and unpick in rural areas, and it's harder to get deeper conversations with people in rural areas because they do put up those invisible walls. So that's the kind of stuff that we do, and we do it with institutions, we do it with churches, we do it with Orange Order, we do it with the GAA, we do it with the Royal Black Preceptory, we do it with the British Legion. We do it with a whole swathe of society. We don't leave anybody out. We work across all communities in rural areas.